Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica, and it's that time of month. It's the last Thursday of the month, and that means it's the MiSTer News Roundup. And it's been a really fun month of potentials and also some things that have come to us. Before we get too far involved there, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and that notification bell definitely helps us out. If you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. And hey, I got laid off last week, so maybe think about it twice. Kidding. Not really, but you know. Anyways, right off the top, we got Super Game Boy Core. This is not one that I expected to see, but there are some Game Boy games that have Super Game Boy enhancements on them, like Mole Mania here, which is a game that I don't really know much about. I played a few times, but I'm getting more into now that I have it on the MiSTer Core. And this is a separate core, and I will do a whole video about it with a setup guide, because it does require some specialized things just to get it going. But once you do, you get a really fun look at Game Boy games in a way that most people didn't experience them, because I never even saw a Super Game Boy as a kid. I knew it existed, but I never saw one in stores, so this is kind of like my first tour around it. But it's fun to have something like this on MiSTer, because it's always exciting to experience something you normally wouldn't, and considering to make this run at home you need a Super Nintendo and a Super Game Boy, it's not the easiest thing to do, but it is here now on MiSTer. Moving on to the PlayStation 1 side, there have been a lot of improvements, some small, some larger, in the core, and it is already an absolutely spectacular core, but the developer, Robert, has still been working on this and adding a bunch of new things, some of the things that you will notice and some things you won't. Let's kind of go over to his Twitter and talk about some of the specifics of that. He released a whole new set of changes, and I will go over what some of them mean, because I know a lot of you guys like to know what's under the hood or how the sausage gets made with MiSTer. But the first thing he did was a hack for PAL games to run at 60 Hz NTSC signal without being cut off vertically, because they do use a different screen sort of resolution. So it's absolutely amazing to have something like that, because some PAL games have different features or even other features you may not have seen, and there are some PAL PlayStation 1 exclusives. He's also renamed the data cache option to Turbo, and that can speed some games up. But one of the big things is the graphic transformation engine, or GTE, timings have been improved, so things will be so much closer to real hardware, they'll be indistinguishable. That way when you're playing something like Ridge Racer Type R4 here, side by side, of course I have control, you're going to see a situation in which the games, things like cutscenes that are in-engine, would run at the exact same speed, frame-to-frame lock. That's how close they would be to the original hardware. So those timings are great to have improved, but again, if you've yet to play the PlayStation 1 core for some strange reason, you absolutely owe it to yourself, because even though it's public, even though it's part of download, I know some people haven't gotten to it, but make sure you keep updating your MiSTers, because Robert keeps adding small tweaks that make this such an incredible experience. Things like small graphical effects on Final Fantasy IX here. The rain would do some weird things, and he goes in and recodes certain tiny aspects to make sure they look exactly like they should if you were playing on original hardware. That is the level and attention to detail that he provides with all of these things, and it is amazing. Now moving on to the arcade side, there's a lot of potential fun things coming. Vertex having a little bit of a slowdown on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles core, but he is still working on it, and hopefully by year's end we'll be playing this absolute arcade classic on our MiSTer, because these are highly coveted arcade boards. They're not the most expensive. You can get a TNMT board for like $500, but if you can play it on FPGA on your television from the comfort of your own couch, that's going to be even so much better. And he's going through the die traces again, because he's already confirmed main clock and other counters. Basically using an oscilloscope to look at these signals would be my presumption. So he is working on it. It is probably going to improve as time goes on, but that's how hard these things are. You're dealing with tracing paths on dies and onto the PCB itself to understand exactly how the hardware functions. It's not an easy job, and I only understand maybe the surface level, but if you have any questions, leave them down below and I'll try to help you out. Now moving on, Ikari Warriors is also booting on MiSTer. There's cores not available yet, but this is an SNK classic before the Neo Geo was even a glimmer in SNK's eye, and it's absolutely spectacular. This should be coming to MiSTer soon as well. And if you've never played Ikari Warriors, and I'm sure some of you haven't because this is an old game, it's from 1986, I was barely alive at this point in time, it is a classic run and gun from SNK. Kind of has a little bit of Shock Troopers vibes, long before that series would ever become a thing on the Neo Geo. But if you've never played it before, give it an emulation try now. It works perfectly in MAME, but I can't wait to be playing this on MiSTer, because SNK had a ton of amazing games long before the Neo Geo existed, and those kind of get forgotten about. They've become the Neo Geo company in everyone's memories, but they really are so much more than that. Now on the arcade side, something that did just release, and I'll be talking about the Cave core next week, Gaia Crusaders is now available on the Cave 68K core, and it is an absolutely wild and wacky beat 'em up, because you would think the Cave PCB would just be shmups from Cave, and there's a ton of amazing ones on there, but there are games from other manufacturers, and Gaia Crusaders is one of them. This was in beta for its Patreon members, but it is now public, so if you use update all, that core is going to come down for you, and you're going to be able to play it, and you're going to have an absolute ton of fun. Now on a really big news alert from Jotego, he is teasing and hinting an OutRun core for MiSTer, and OutRun is one of the most spectacular 2D racing games Sega's ever made of all time, in my opinion. And the idea that we could be playing OutRun soon on our MiSTers is absolutely spectacular, because if you've never played this game before, how did you even find my channel? It's about retro gaming. You should have played this. If you've never played it before, after the video, download it and give it a go, because it's probably not going to be coming next week or the week after from Jotego, but hopefully sometime soon. But that got me thinking, outside of news, something like OutRun, it could work, but maybe something like Cool Riders. I wonder if this would be possible on MiSTer, because it's a variation of the Sega System 32, and that is a system I really hope comes to MiSTer one day. But just kind of wanted to talk about this game for a second. It's absolutely spectacular. And there is also Logitech wheel support being worked on for MiSTer as well, because trust me, if you're going to play the arcade OutRun, you'll want a wheel for it. Moving on, but still on the arcade side, going back to that Cave 68K core, another game that's a shmup but not made by Cave, Hot Dog Storm. They have the intro running on this, so there's more Cave 68K games coming. Hot Dog Storm is a very interesting game. If you've never heard about it before, I did a video on it a while ago. I'll try to remember to leave a link down below. But you would think it has something to do with hot dogs based upon this title screen, but that is a lie. There are no hot dogs in this game. They really let me down. I wanted to be shooting hot dogs from some sort of Wienermobile style spaceship, and damn it, the developers gave it an awesome name and made a decent shmup. It's definitely worth checking out, and hopefully it comes to MiSTer as well soon, because it seems like shortly the entirety of the games on that Cave 68K PCB platform are going to be running on MiSTer, and that is always a very exciting time. Now, keeping it on the arcade theme and going a little bit old school here from Technos, WWF Superstars. If you've never played it, it's not the best wrestling game ever made, but I love all wrestling games, and it is an absolute ton of fun. And where else do you get a photo of Miss Elizabeth, Andre the Giant, and Hulk Hogan on one instruction manual? It is classic WWF start to finish. And I love when these type of games are on their way to MiSTer, because they're so much fun to be played with friends. And trust me, if you are playing this game and you're not using Hacksaw Jim Duggan, you are making a mistake, because he's one of the most classic wrestlers of all time. His whole 2x4 thing when I was a kid just made me laugh, and I don't watch wrestling anymore, but I certainly did back in the era of the $1 Million Man and people like that. But this is another core on the arcade side that should be coming to MiSTer hopefully by year's end, and there's a lot of arcade cores in development on systems that I'm really into, so that it's going to be really exciting to see these sort of things come over, because it's a big news month for the arcade scene in general. Something like R-Type here as well, it's starting to work on MiSTer. They've got just basically the beginning of the game running, and these things take time. These cores are not a week's worth of work, they're not 2 weeks worth of work, they take a lot of time. It's almost a full-time job to get these things running, and people go over stuff like the Jalico Mega System 1 here for the Rodland core that's coming up. You have to do so many things, like basically just map out via traces in some manner how all the different RAMs, ROMs, and chips communicate with themselves, so you can understand what the system would be doing in the first place. And the Jalico Mega System 1, if you don't know what these specs look like, it is similar-ish to a Neo Geo. Of course, so many things use that Motorola 68K, so there's been some research done in the background for sure. Now, the last thing I'll say on the shortage issues, you always ask me where to get MiSTers. I've had so many reports of people being successful going directly to Terasic and ordering there. Shipping apparently is still high, it's like $30 to ship this, but if you want a MiSTer and you want it soon, go over to their website and check it out, because everyone who's tried to order from them has had success. But honestly, that is MiSTer news for July. The Super Game Boy core is the one big thing of the month, but there's so many potential awesome arcade cores coming. This is basically an arcade dedicated news video. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. I love chatting with you guys. I'll be back next Thursday with more MiSTer. I'll have videos throughout the week as well, but like I mentioned earlier, do me that favor, hit like and subscribe. But a lot of arcade stuff is coming to MiSTer, and that's never a bad thing. We'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.